Fernando Bellver is one of the most internationally renowned Spanish artists. His works have been exhibited in the most important cities of Europe and North America. He dedicates 3 months out of the year to painting, 3 to sculpting, and 3 to engraving. He spends the rest of his time traveling. For Bellver, traveling is not a synonym for taking a vacation, but for searching and experimenting. It's a reunion with the shapes and colors of the world. And for this search, for the development of a large part of his works, the Nile has been a continuous obsession. Egyptian culture and mythology elaborate the river. They are his great traveling passions.
Well, I don't really travel. I get away. I leave here. I leave my studio behind. I leave my work behind, although it's something that fascinates me. I can't stay at home because I feel the need to go to my studio. So what I do is plan a trip and go away. I go far away from Madrid. I may go to, who knows, North Africa, or I could go to South America. But what I need to do is get far away from all these things that fascinate me so much.
Khartoum is one of the most important geographic enclaves in Africa. It's the exact point where the Blue Nile and the White Nile come together. The encounter of 2 paths that for centuries drove geographers and explorers from the Western world completely crazy. Which was the true Nile? What path should be followed to find the true source of the river? At this point, one needed to stop and spend time in the heart of ancient Nubia, and then follow the path. The Nile was a mysterious and complex highway, now divided in 2, that penetrated an enormous open space. The maps of Nubia and the interior lands of Africa appeared to be covered with drawings of giants and monsters that protected the fabulous treasures. This corner of the river was one of the gateways to the land of dreams and adventure. This territory, now stripped of its geographic mystery, is called Sudan. A country with a turbulent history, like all those of the Sahel area. Battered by the eternal conflict among Christians, animists, and Muslims. Punished due to the confrontations between the Arabs of the north and the blacks of the south. An intense history of advanced civilizations whose memory dates back to the time of ancient Egypt.
Well,
I've been going to Egypt for years. Egypt is a country that I'm very interested in because of its art and culture. The monuments are perhaps what I am least interested in. I like to find works of art in Saqqara or in the Valley of the Kings, created by anonymous artists, but high-quality works. I like to see how the same culture has stretched down the entire river throughout almost 20 centuries and from Lake Victoria to the Mediterranean, acting as a bridge connecting all the races on the Nile, from the Negroids to the Arabs today. I see it as an extremely interesting blend of cultures that move me deeply and directly. I have traveled the sources of the Nile that originate in Ethiopia, in the Siman Mountains, and what I have left to do, which I hope to fulfill during the next few weeks, is visit the part that crosses Sudan. Whenever I travel, I take a book with me. I carry a blank book and I draw in it. I take this book for 3 essential reasons. First, because I do not know how to take good pictures. I don't know how to use a camera. Second, I can never remember anything. I don't remember the places that I have visited. And third, I think I don't have an interior world. I am not a reflexive person. I don't stay inside a temple for 4 hours, nor in front of something. So I draw everything, which allows me to see things more attentively than taking pictures. I lose the group, which is always a good thing since they always are impatient and move ahead. And then I don't organize them or put them in any sort of order. I put them in a box, and my wife saves them.
No los organizo ni llevo un orden, sino que los voy guardando en una caja y se los queda a mi mujer.
I have always had a special attraction to rivers. There are people who collect stamps, but I like to think that I collect rivers. And the Nile is not just any river. The Nile is one of those rivers that might have been invented to make man's dreams more impressive. Today, I have made one of my dreams come true. I am here in Khartoum, peacefully drawing the place where the Blue Nile and the White Nile come together. From here to the mouth of the river, there is only one Nile. From this point on, all the controversies and legends disappear and allow the backbone of life to spread throughout the desert. There are only two rivers in the world with the same symbolic strength, the Ganges and the Amazon. There are other rivers, so many rivers with their spirits, myths, and possessions. But for me as a collector, only these three uphold the evocative power that is hidden beneath those things that seem eternal, as if they have always been there to satisfy the innate desire of man to reinvent the world.
Khartoum is a city that became popular because of the river cruises, especially after independence. The creation of one country in an immense expanse of land, in which 100 different languages are spoken, and where cultural interests and economic disparities are combined, could have no other consequence than conflict. It seems as if the civil war between the North and the South will never end. Nevertheless, Khartoum tries to be a space for understanding, a city where refugees from all ethnic backgrounds have come together. Men and women who are fleeing from the war, or who are simply in search of a better future. They have had no other choice but to blend together and to create paths of coexistence. These people have arrived bringing the fields to the city. Sudan is a country where tradition plays a fundamental role. All kinds of traditions, those marked by underdevelopment and those that provide an identity for the individual. And these traditions, this apparent ancient world, are felt in the streets and in the outlying neighborhoods of Khartoum. Even today, the camel caravans come to the edges of the city because of the market. The livestock comes from the northern and western regions of the country, where many tribes live like nomads and dedicate themselves to raising livestock. The Nuba people come from the south, from the region of Kordofan. Every Friday, the Nuba community comes together to organize freestyle wrestling tournaments, a regular practice in daily life beyond the southern mountains. Wrestling is something more than a sport. It's a ritual that does not favor confrontation, but unity. The Nubian fight represents solidarity, nobility, and power. Every Friday afternoon, in front of the small mosque on the outskirts of Khartoum, hundreds of men gather together to sing and dance for hours in order to spark a mystical contact with God. They are the dervish dancers, the Sufis from Omdurman. In the words of Mircea Eliade, Sufism is an interior facet of Islam. It's a way of life that searches for the realization of unity and the presence of God through love. Knowledge based on experience and the ecstatic union with the Creator, to whom all the love of what is mystic is addressed.
Who are the Sufis? What are they like? How did they cross the desert and enter the forests? How do they live in the big cities of our world? I have dedicated my time to studying the Sufis, their lives, and above all, their ideas. I've discovered a very important world. This is the world I wanted to depict. All the figures that appear in my works with their physical and mental settings, with their nights and days, with their universal vision.
The term Sufi is most likely derived from the wool dresses, or suf, which were used by the ascetic Muslims who were named and addressed as poor or dervish. The Sufi texts reveal that the asceticism and devotional activities of the Christian monks played an important role in the birth of Sufism. But the true origin of the Sufi movement is found in Islam alone, and more specifically, in the Quran. The Sufis have always been persecuted by Orthodox Islam. Orthodox Muslims have always hurled insults against the pantheism of the Sufis, against their dissolute behavior and their carelessness with the prayers, fasting, and pilgrimage to the Mecca.
Human beings are part of this universe, a living part as well as a responsible part. The universe is part of man, too. This vision is shared by several religions. But I think that Islamic Sufism does this in the most complete way. For the Sufis, man was created with great wisdom and a love of God, and love for all other human beings, for the trees, the birds, and all the beauties and beings that surround him. Sufism gives the individual freedom and at the same time responsibility. When an individual is conscious of his liberty and his responsibility, he becomes a creator, just like God himself.
For the Sufis, man is a microcosm and the universe the macrocosm. Man is the clearest image of the divine in the mirror of creation. A surah or chapter of the Quran that touches the heart of these men is that which talks about God as a being who is closer to man than his jugular vein. Another element of the Quran that they gladly accept is the recommendation to practice meditation, an act that is carried out accompanied by controlled respiration, music, and dance, which provokes individual and collective ecstasy.
The color green represents paradise. It's the color of life. Where you find the color green, you will find life. You will find trees, water, birds, a sheltering shade, and a breeze. Everything is linked to the color green. It is the opposite of poverty, the opposite of fire and repression. It is the space for human existence, incorporated in nature. It is the future of man. Green is the color that dominates my work, and it's the color of the Sufis. Sufis love the color green because in it they find a symbol of proximity to the Prophet Muhammad. We believe it to be a form of union with Islam.
En los años, en 1950 terminó la carrera.
After the war.
Después de la guerra. Que viajó a Inglaterra después.
Rashid Diab is a Sudanese artist and art theoretician, an example of the approach to the West that has been produced in African art since World War II. He studied and worked in Madrid for 20 years, where he met Fernando Bellver and Mercedes, his present wife.
Un artista es un filósofo.
An artist is a philosopher. He should know a lot about art and reflect on the art he creates, his own production. An artist is not an interior decorator.
decorador de una casa.
Nor is he the kind of person who makes pretty things.
Una persona que hace cosas bonitas. Lo que para
For
mí
me,
este
a
cuadro
painting
es
sums up
resumen de
all
toda la
human
historia
history.
humana. El arte
African
africano
art is distinguished for one very simple
distingue por
thing.
una cosa muy sencilla, que es
Its goal is to fit into nature,
desintegrarse a la naturaleza,
not separate itself
no
from
separar
nature,
la naturaleza, no
not take
ocultarse
advantage
de
of
la
nature,
naturaleza, sino formar
but
parte de
form
la
part of
naturaleza.
nature.
Mucha gente habla de la
A lot of people
globalización
talk about
y la
globalization and the new
nueva
theories,
teoría de que el
that the
mundo
world
es
is
pequeño.
small.
El mundo siempre ha
The
sido
world has
pequeño
always
a
been
través del
small in
arte.
art.
El mundo es,
The world, for an
para el
artist, is
artista
his
es su
place.
lugar. Lo humano para
For
mí
me,
es lo
what is human
importante.
is what
Lo humano-
matters.
lo humano conlleva
What is
todo.
human
Lo humano
entails
conlleva
everything.
la buena
What is human entails
concepción.
good conception.
Lo humano lleva-
What is
conlleva
human entails
respeto
respecting one
a otro.
another.
Porque si eres humano, usted
Because
cree
if
que
you're
los demás son
human,
humanos.
you believe
Si
that
no eres
everyone
humano,
else is
entonces
human.
los demás son unos
If you aren't human,
bestias para ti.
you believe
Y
that
ese es un
everyone else is an
concepto
animal.
que aplicarlo en el arte es muy
And this is a very difficult
Porque,
concept to apply to art because no culture has the
ninguna
right
cultura
to
tiene derecho a
judge
evaluar a
another
otra
culture
cultura, bajo ningún-
under any circumstances.
ningún concepto. Cada
Each
cultura
one
tiene
has
sus
its origins,
génesis,
its roots,
sus,
and its elements.
raíces, sus elementos.
And if you
Y
don't
si no
study
estudias
painting,
esa pintura o esa
you cannot
arte
express
a
your
fondo,
opinion
no
about
puedes
it.
opinar sobre ello. El artista
Besides his own culture, the artist reflects human
aparte de su
culture.
propia cultura,
The philosophy of a person
del ser
is his
humano.
art.
La filosofía de uno es su arte. La mujer
Women in Sudan wear
Sudan
a top.
lleva top.
I'm not sure what it's called in English.
No sé cómo se llama en español. El top
The top is a kind of cloth that she wraps around her entire body. This top comes in many colors. I love colors, so I've studied this extensively. What I mean is that through the tops of Sudanese women, I study color, more than the figure.
De estudio para mí. O sea, a través de los tops de las mujeres sudanesas.
They look like paintings in the end,
Más que la
but have
figura.
other qualities.
Por atrás se parece como cuadros y tiene otras cualidades, son muy
They're
bonitas.
very pretty because they have more
Porque
curves.
las curvas. Entonces la curva con el color, con la forma y
The curve,
la-
with the color and the shape and how the cloth falls,
la música y tal, eso
well,
tiene-
to me, they are
para mí
outlines.
son bocetos,
And they're not
realmente
really
son cuadros.
paintings because
Porque
my
mis
paintings are
cuadros
semi-abstract.
Son semi-abstractos. Yo la adoro cuando sube las escaleras.
Mira quién está hablando, ¿no?
The children of Rashid and Mercedes were born in Spain. They both speak English and French, as well as Spanish and Arabic. They use both of these languages between them interchangeably.
Como mujer europea, que se viene a
As a
vivir en
European
Sudán,
woman who has
podría
come to live in
decir
Sudan,
que nunca
I could
he tenido
say
ningún problema
that I never have
y
had any problems with the people here.
me han respetado
They have
como
respected
soy.
me as I am.
Siempre tú también tienes que
Of
poner
course,
algo de respeto.
you know that you always have to be respectful of the customs here and not be difficult. For example, I would never think of wearing a miniskirt on the street. It's not a custom here, and I wouldn't do it.
No lo haría, pero
In reality,
todo el mundo me ha
everyone
tratado
has
con
treated me
respeto.
with
Me doy
respect.
cuenta de que puedo
I realize that I
trabajar,
can work,
que todas las mujeres
and that
aquí
all the women work
trabajan,
as well, not just me.
no solo yo, que
I work in the art gallery, but I see women working at the bank, working for companies. They even have executive positions.
en las empresas, trabajando incluso en cargos directivos.
Hola,
Hola,
¿qué tal?
muy bien. ¿Está?
¿Cómo? ¿Qué tal?
Muy bien.
¿Has de venir del cole?
Sí.
¿Y hablas en español en el cole?
No, en inglés.
¿No en inglés?
Sí. Bueno, cuando tengo las clases de árabe, hablo en árabe.
Muy bien, muy bien.
So do you like this painting?
Well,
Yo
I
veo
see like a
como
wing
ala
here.
aquí,
And
ala.
over here, there's a kind of cut snake. Here,
What part of the painting do you like most?
this part.
Why?
Because it looks like a doorway, like when they found King Tut's
La
tomb.
tumba de Tutankamón.
¿Sí?
Sí.
¿Dónde estabas tú cuando encontraron la tumba? Y pinto cuando me sale una idea o tengo ganas de pintar. O sea,
I paint when I have an idea or I feel like painting,
Porque los colores yo creo que
because the
no dan-
colors don't reveal their secrets so easily.
Tiene que estar uno
One has to be mentally prepared to receive information from the colors,
del color.
because I often sit before the painting
Muchas veces me enfrento al
and
cuadro
don't
y
see anything.
no veo nada, no me sale nada. No...
The way of painting a picture, the picture itself, the canvas on an easel, is a Western invention. Color comes from Earth. I am part of the Earth, and all this is something that I really do not understand completely. I don't know why the colors come, nor why I use these colors. I know that I have a general idea, a way of seeing, a way of harmonizing things, but I don't know why I've placed these colors here. Maybe because it plays with this and it picks up the entire image with the animal. I'm just playing. I don't have anything concrete in mind. I know perfectly well that when I finish this painting, it is going to be something I like. But the content depends on each culture. I like Western painting, European and American painting, but I can't copy it.
Es el hermano que me suele traer aquí al río para dibujar cuando tenía 7, 8 años. Sí, sentamos aquí justamente. Realmente a él le gustaba muchísimo lo que hacía, como decía ayer. Y él te puede, si quieres preguntarle en inglés algo. What do you think about?
Rashid Diab was born and raised in Medani, a small city located south of Khartoum. His family is very large, just like most Sudanese families, and most of his relatives still live in Medani. When he was a child, they brought his older brothers to this corner of the banks of the Nile to paint.
The view of the Nile River. I would draw the people bathing here. This has changed a lot. The island in the Nile, you see it? Every year people come to this island.
El Nilo en este momento tiene el color de la plata. ¿Viste cómo cambia el color ahora? Y se ve más plata ahí al lado.
بختلف عننا والله بجد يعني.
He was a really delightful child. He was different from the rest of us. He played in the sand and with mud. He painted landscapes on small pieces of marble and on ceramic tiles, and he would sell them door to door. With the money, he bought his paints and his things.
This is my school, my primary school. This is where I took my first painting classes. In this classroom over here, there was a professor who was so nice. I even remember his name. His name was Síguenos. He was a painter and a person who liked art very much. He also gave drawing classes.
Rashid studied in this school, which is still standing, until he was an adolescent.
السلام ورحمة الله برحان الحمد لله الله كويس الحمد لله دكتور إن شاء الله كويس الله يبارك فيك الحمد لله السلام ورحمة الله يبارك فيك الله يبارك فيك الحمد لله شرفتوا الحمد لله الدكتور راشد دياب وهو فنان عالمي تشكيلي ومعه فنان عالمي برضه من اللي هو من اسبانيا.
Aquí donde estaba el salón antiguo, aquí está la aceptación de mujeres, ¿cuántos hermanos hemos vivido aquí? Hasta 11, 12 años.
لا
Zahara es artista. Arte pobre.
Rashid left Medani at a young age to study in Khartoum. He was granted scholarships which allowed him to travel the world.
I was very bored when I was about 18 years old. Everything seemed to be the same in my town. The same things, the same people, and the same conversations. I knew what everything was about, and for me, it was time to change. So that's when I began to travel. I went to Egypt. I went to many countries. I went to Europe, traveled around, and then I realized that there were other cultures, and that there were other people, and the world didn't end here. It didn't stop where I was born. Not in Khartoum, not in Sudan. There's another world to be seen, because this is what fills an artist. This is what fills a person. Because often, you don't even need to paint, but to see things from the inside, and to make paintings from the inside, in a person's subconscious.
Bastawi Baghdadi was the first Sudanese artist to lean towards contemporary art. Until he arrived on the scene, art in Sudan was what the artists and artisans of the different tribes spread throughout the country had always done. But Bastawi incorporated a new dimension based on Western structures. He was also the first director of the Sudanese Fine Arts School and the country's first fine arts professor.
For the Sudanese art, everybody is an artist. They are artists by nature. They're actually folk artists, artisans, craftsmen, because it's in the tradition of the old Sudan. And they don't think they need to go to study that because it's a question of family, environment, education. All these countries had their historical, cultural background behind them. That's why when a school was started, a great deal is behind every national citizen, every national artist has a great culture behind him. It's not out of nothing. They have hundreds and thousands of years of culture, art, visual and literary, behind them. Well, it was very exciting. It was a great pleasure for me as a dean of a college to have a Queen of England, to visit the one educational institute in the Sudan. She was very happy. She was very pleased to see, and she was very generous with us. And I think her ambassador who came with her at that time was also happy because he himself did not expect to see such things by young artists. And she realized and she saw the history of the Sudan. Well, Sawakin is an old port of Sudan, the first port on the Red Sea. And I love those buildings, the buildings of Sawakin, which are built from the coral stones and the coral plants of the Red Sea. It's a beautiful white thing in the middle of blue viridian and blue ultramarine and blue, all sorts of greens. The smell of the old buildings still gives me the feeling that people are moving with their beautiful costumes, beautiful architectural buildings, beautiful mansions, 2- and 3-story buildings which were not built inside Sudan, in Omdurman and so on.
My name is Ramadani Sassi. I'm Sudanese. I met Fernando Bellver in Egypt 2 years ago. I was working there with a Canadian archaeologist, and he was exhibiting his works in Cairo. I promised him that if he came to Sudan, I would take him to see wonderful ancient places in Egypt that are even more impressive than the Temple of Luxor or Abu Simbel.
Now I work for the...
Until recently, these places could not be visited, but now you can go there.
I have two...
Ever since my country has been open to archaeologists and Western tourists, I do not need to leave in order to find work. Instead, I work with them.
The time of departure for a place where I've never been before is always a time that gives me a strange sensation of fear and relief at the same time. Traveling is a change in routine for another reality that ends up changing you. The beginning of a trip is similar to the creative process. It's a flash that passes through your brain, which illuminates you and blinds you at the same time. The image flows through my brain, and little by little, while I paint the picture, this idea begins to transform into new figures that create a different world, one that was also inside me. This is a trip, the beginning of something new that I imagined, which becomes real by the force of time and unforeseen geographies.
One must travel more than 80 miles from Elephantine Island. Then enter a plain where the Nile runs among the islands and reaches a great lake in which the nomads graze their animals. After crossing the lake, one enters a channel of the Nile and should disembark in order to walk parallel to the water for 40 days. There are many stones and slopes that make it impossible to travel on the water. Then, once again, one gets in the boat and sails for another 12 days in order to finally reach the city that they call Meroe. They say it is the capital. They only know Zeus and Dionysus, whom they worship passionately. This is the description of the route of Meroe, written by Herodotus in 430 BC. It is also the first time that this city was mentioned in classical Greek literature. Meroe was the capital of the empire that dominated Upper Egypt from the 10th century BC until the modern era. Meroe is also remembered by Eratosthenes, who calculated the circumference of the Earth, the 7 latitudes, and their climates. He used this city as a reference point, one that has been valid until modern times. Meroe was a complex with more than 500 pyramids that the Italian Giuseppe Ferlini strove to blow up in order to bring to light the enormous treasure that was hidden in their interior. With the pretext of archaeological research, he started to destroy them one by one until he found the gold. Bracelets, rings, figurines dedicated to the gods. All kinds of objects of worship that ended up in his private collection first and at the Berlin and Munich museums later. the splendor of Egypt's archaeological wealth has outshined the value of the Sudanese legacy. Starting from the year 2300 BC, the kingdoms of the pharaohs began to expand towards the south and changed this land into one of the most productive colonies. About 40 tons of gold was taken from this land each year, gold that was used to amplify the treasures of the different pharaohs. The remains of this grandeur could be seen in the faraway southern provinces. But around the year 1000, the Nubians conquered the north and unified Upper and Lower Egypt.
And at the top, we put gold M, no?
No, they put them down.
The gold is down.
It's down.
That, with the dead.
Meroe was one of the capitals, and Jebel Barkal an important temple dedicated to the god Ammon. The capital of the Egyptian Empire, based in the south, was Napata. The temple of Jebel Barkal sat near what was once this city. It was built at the foot of the mountain, a position from where it was easy to dominate the movements of the sun over the axis of the river.
Ramadan was right when he told me in Cairo that his country was going to surprise me. We have only been traveling for a few days, and I feel as if I have been here for a long time. There are places that are able to provoke this strange sensation, the sensation that time stops around you, as if the trip constantly develops in a closed space, from which you cannot escape without a magic formula. Sudan gives me this weightless sensation. This happens to me in places where the colors seem to be invented. The light and the color in northern Sudan are not familiar to me. They are ancient colors, colors that are so close to the earth that they seem to belong to a world that we thought was lost forever. But they are here. They are the colors and the light with which everything must have started.
In the 4th century AD, Nubia fell under the Christian kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia. Christianity spread, and Dongola was the center of the new religion that had just settled in Nubian territory. During this time, trade relations with the south stabilized, and this part of the river was the witness to the increasing presence of slaves, ivory, animal skins, and ebony. Later on, in the 7th century, the flood of Arabs coming from Egypt took control of Nubia, and the process of converting the people to Islam began, one that has continued down to today.
It amazes me how time plays with art to create new forms. I have never considered myself an artist. I am someone who looks at the efforts of man and nature with perplexity in order to change the forms of things. Centuries ago, this adobe and stone skeleton was most likely a church that later would become a mosque. Then man most likely abandoned the mosque to its fate so that it alone would decide to embody this kind of formless nothing. But it is now that it does not seem to have any purpose when its presence is essential. There is something beautiful, perversely beautiful, in the destruction of things built by man, especially when this is a slow destruction, a destruction that is just a change in shape, a gradual recreation, with wind and water as man's fellow conspirators in the task of reinventing the landscape.
Kerme is the gateway to present-day Nubia. For centuries, Nubia and Bilad al-Sud, which means the land of the blacks, were confused with one another. Nubia was a kind of transition across the river towards this mysterious space given to fantastic tales. Today, geography doesn't make concessions to fables, nor does it allow for doubtful territories. Today, it is known and affirmed that Nubia begins in the third waterfall, which is very close to the town of Kerme, and ends in Aswan, located in Egypt on the other side of the border.
Can I to paint the other side?
Yeah. Suraj, ممكن تدي القلم يرسم الجنب الثاني؟ قول أيوة شديد.
In Kerme, as well as in the rest of Nubia, being an artist is nothing extraordinary. They say that there is a painter, a musician, and a poet in every household. Each town has its own distinctive colors and its own concept of aesthetics. In Kerme, they have become specialized in the art of decorating motor vehicles. In the middle of the street, painters offer themselves in order to give form to the whims of the owners of vans, motorcycles, and buses. They usually change the drawing every year. Any important experience for the client, whether it be a wedding or a profitable business, is a good excuse to place the vehicle in the hands of the painter. Nubian architecture is probably the heir to what popular Egyptian architecture was more than 3,000 years ago. This is how the homes on the plains along the river must have been like. It's an architecture of sensual and cheerful forms, of colors that induce relaxation and curiosity. Nubian towns are clean and tidy, simple and neighboring like their inhabitants. The Nubian people are known for being friendly and hospitable, hard workers, and especially attached to the river. In the last few years, hundreds of men have been leaving their lands to emigrate to Saudi Arabia or Egypt. The entire family does not usually go. The family unit, the women and children, remain at home. The men go for long periods of time and send money to their families. They only return on occasion for celebrations. The absence of the men has made Nubia a territory dominated by women. They are the ones who keep the household and culture afloat. Most of the men who are still in the towns are either elderly or adolescent. The old men live with their memories of better times. The youths only think about escaping. This emptiness is not new. In Sahel, the men have always been absent, either at war or on a caravan, dreaming that there is a solution to their contradictions far away in the distance. The women are the ones who really belong to this land. The ones who have sweated and broken their backs to make this land inhabitable for thousands of years. The ones who forever and ever will watch their men disappear with distant eyes.
I once read that there is still the same amount of water on the earth as when the atmosphere was created, the same atmosphere we breathe today. Trapped in the polar glaciers, floating adrift in the clouds, resting in the oceans, or running down the streams and rivers. I have the feeling that the same water has passed through here hundreds of times with the same attitude as someone who knows the path that leads home. The Soleb Temple is a work of Amenhotep, son of the brilliant architect who built the Temple of Luxor. It was built to commemorate the jubilee of the pharaoh Amenophis III. It represents one of the most beautiful periods of Egyptian art. It is dedicated to the god Ammon, but the image of the pharaoh is also worshipped inside. Many details suggest the advent of the solar theology that would be imposed on the Nile Valley with the successor of Amenophis, Akhenaton, the god of the sun. The temple was consecrated by the pharaoh himself, accompanied by the court and his family. Soleb is a splendid affirmation of the cosmic power of the pharaoh, of his desire to put order in the chaos of the universe by worshiping the sun. Art is nothing more than this, a way of organizing the chaos, or rather, the illusion of this momentary ephemeral order, an illusion that calms the perverse mind of the artist. For a few minutes, a few seconds, on the surface of a limited space, man thinks he understands the world. But replacing the works of the gods is a big mistake.